Okay, let me make sure I'm pinned. Nope. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, day two. Today, as I mentioned during our mindfulness practice, today is going to be focused on relationships and on communication having to do with relationships. So let me pin myself. There we go. So, welcome. Talking about relationships, talking about communication. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of information and hopefully some skills that are of use to you. As I said today, during this back and forth, we'll be talking more about specific skills with conversations and also looking at our relationships and how they serve us, how maybe they can better serve us. And then later, our VIPs will have an experience where we look at rumors and stories and things that come up and how to navigate that and how to uh, kind of cut through that for ourselves and for those around us. Okay, so I am going to share my screen because I love to share content because I can't help myself. Okay, let's see, share screen and here. Okay, beginning. All right, perfect. All right. So, relationships. As I said, this is a big focus for today. And part of relationships is looking at our conversations within those and navigating those. I know it can be kind of a rough topic. So, let's just start with taking some breaths together. So, I invite you, if you're in a space that's feeling safe and comfy, to close your eyes, or if not, you can hold a soft gaze and just feeling your body in space. And let's inhale through our nose and exhale, inhaling peace, exhaling stress, inhaling love, exhaling discomfort, just inhaling whatever serves and releasing whatever does not. All right. That always helps recenter me. Okay. So jumping in. All right. So today we're going to talk about how to increase our awareness of our internal thoughts and feelings, reflecting on how we care for ourselves and how that in return affects how we can be when we're with others within whatever type of relationships. These can be professional relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships, all of the above. And then increasing that awareness that love of ourselves, compassion for ourselves is really the foundation for good relationships. And then, of course, allowing for acceptance of what is, which is, sounds good on paper, but isn't always easy in practice. So, feeling socially connected is that experience that you feel like you belong, that you're, in a group of folks sharing this virtual space together, that you have maybe a close knit family, maybe a family of choice, uh, maybe a loved one or best friend or someone that you can rely on. Having that connectedness is essential to feeling healthy and feeling satisfied with your life. Studies have found that having that social connectedness is prediction for life longevity, for ability to fight off illness, for ability to engage in a healthier lifestyle. All of these things are affected by our social connectedness. There was a study looking at Harvard students, they originally were looking kind of at like heart health, and they check in with them yearly as they got older, and they found that those who had a social connection were much more likely to be alive the year following versus those who were socially isolated, unfortunately, had a much higher chance of not being alive. And that's not necessarily due to dying by suicide. That's due to just regular life issues, whether it be a heart concern or diabetes or what have you. And, as part of that, we have seen that those who have social relationships, who have a connectedness with others, are more likely to leave the house, to choose a healthier meal, to choose to be more active in their bodies, to choose to engage in mindfulness and prayer, to do the things that we talk about are super good for your health, body health, mind health, spirit health. So yeah, I mean, we found it's good for our health. It's seniors that are socially connected are more likely to move their bodies. They're also more likely to be able to move their bodies. We see less disability. We see a reduced risk of dementia. So actually less likely to develop things like memory loss and concerns in that space. Um, and having those intimate relationships of whatever sort are more likely to predict having economic success, having success with physical health. Again, part of that is because you start making good choices about your health, um, and are feeling more invested in your health because you want to be there for others. I mean, that's, yeah, whenever I see folks one on one, I ask like, what's the most important to them? And those who are socially connected, often in the top three, are family, relationship, kids, whatever, people are in their lives are listed up there. And often part of why they are engaging in treatment with me is because they want to be able to be more active with someone that they care about, or be present for someone's big ceremony that's happening in the following year. These are reasons people engage in self-care, and that's great. And in turn, communities then support those who are getting older in ways that can keep them vitalized. We see studies of nursing homes that are engaged with kindergartners, and how both sets of groups are benefiting from those interactions. And that's, health as well as socially. So again, if we are isolated for whatever reason, we are more likely, unfortunately, to have heart disease, to have an increased risk of death, as I stated. So a lot of this is about staying centered. This is my now almost 12-year-old, when she was probably more like let's see, she's got that little baby face. I think she was probably like 4 or 5-ish. And she had learned some baby yoga. And that's her being a tree in her PJs. Yeah, that's full on like little kid's house, as you can tell in the background, because it was inundated with little kid stuff. But this is a big part of being able to have successful relationships, is allowing that steady state of being your own tree. The trees, something, I mean, I love a good tree imagery. As y'all know, Dara Wellness is a Dara is Irish for oak. And that's big about tree of life imagery. Also, the oaks that are in New Orleans, oaks are in Ireland. There's a lot of like shared ancestry there. Trees are all interconnected in their root systems, but they stand tall on their own as well. They support one another. They drop acorns or seedlings and what have you to grow future plants. Their leaves that are dropped, because they no longer serve them, feed the soil for the trees that are coming later. And in that way, they're great symbols for how relationships can work well, in that they are building their own trunks and building their own strength, but then their strength supports the ecosystem, supports the trees around them. And again, those root systems all interconnect, and we've learned to, communicate between one another in ways that are fascinating and cool. So allowing yourself to be that strong tree, like my little one is doing here, is going to allow you then to feed your relationships, to feed those around you, to allow your sun to shine in a way that then gives them the energy they need to move forward. One way that we do this is through practicing acceptance. So acceptance and commitment therapy is a wonderful type of therapy. As I think I told y'all, I'm dialectical behavior therapy trained. ACT, the acceptance commitment therapy, is kind of different level of that. It's very much about kind of being in the moment and accepting what's in front of you and working with that versus against it. So acceptance is really being open to what is. And, part of this is being mindful in the moment to see what is rather than what we're making what is up here, which we'll talk about more in our VAP session later. But opening and making room for feelings, whether they be painful feelings, painful sensations, urges, emotions. So making space for physical pain, emotional pain, allowing it to be. That doesn't mean that we like it. That doesn't mean that we're celebrating it. But although with acceptance, you can move to a place of celebration or uh, uh, I don't know if it's celebration so much as just gratitude, maybe. But it drops the struggle. It's about dropping the struggle and not having the suffering that's associated with it. So allowing things to be as they are, and taking away the fighting of what is. Um, yeah, it doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily all fine and dandy, but it's about allowing space for it. So you can kind of explore what that's doing for you physically, mentally, emotionally. And then you can deal with your response to what is versus fighting it and kind of creating a different scenario that's just going to add to your suffering. So it's being open to maintain that awareness. So again, a mindfulness practice really, or a prayer practice really plays a big part in this, because then you can be aware of the suffering in the world and in others, and also within ourselves. It allows for realizing that maybe what someone else is bringing to the table is affecting their way of being, but it's not necessarily about you. And so sometimes what's reflected upon us from others can cause pain for us. But if you're able to add some acceptance and awareness to that space, uh, the suffering can be lessened for you in that it's it's really like about almost like taking that third eye approach of like seeing the relationship from the outside and realizing like, okay, this person has like this stuff that happened in their childhood that they're replaying with me because I remind them of whomever. Um, and that's what's playing out versus there's something wrong with me. And that's not to say like we're perfect, although you are, but we all have our flaws, but it does allow for realizing like where your flaws are versus where what's being projected on you is. Um, People who have trauma in their lives, which a lot of people have different levels of trauma, whether it be something that is called a post-traumatic stress, or whether it be something that affected you and affected the growth of your brain and way of being when you were younger, or even now as an adult. Um, but people who encounter that tend to avoid that emotional pain. And the avoidance is actually what leads to more of a formalized post-traumatic stress. Avoidance is unfortunately a big part of that diagnosis. That's why oftentimes people who have a past history of trauma might fall into the use of substances. That's why we don't recommend uses. It's actually contraindicated to use things like marijuana, benzodiazepines, alcohol for PTSD. I know that politically things have been approved for PTSD, but actually the studies show that it increases suicidality rather than being helpful. These are all part of that. The reason that is it numbs things and makes it so that you're unable to process things and move forward through things. And that might work for you in the moment, but in the long term, I mentioned to you guys, I worked at the VA for over a decade. In the long term, you're going to be like my World War II veterans who are showing up at the VA at age 80 with nightmares and flashbacks and things that they've avoided for most of their adult lives that are coming up for whatever reason now. Um, because the energy doesn't disappear, until we kind of move through it. It's going to still be kind of taking place in your body somewhere. And we see that too, like with the use of opiates, like when folks use pain medication, it numbs everything. This is part of from a psychological standpoint, why opiates aren't great. Obviously, there's the addictive standpoint, but they suppress everything. So when I have worked with folks with chronic pain who are like, dude, I'm sick of like trying to get my opiates, I'm going to get off these things. That's when the PTSD starts coming up because the avoidance is lifted. And again, that's not necessarily a purposeful avoidance, but just the way some of these drugs work is that they suppress things in a way that you're unable to really feel them. Like people who come see me often talk about that with traditional meds, feeling like a zombie or not feeling like you're feeling all the things. And that can get in the way of engaging in therapy or engaging in growth. So that's just something to consider. You know, all this is information for you. And if it doesn't benefit where you are now in your journey, that's okay. But, you know, it's something that you can consider. So when we're looking at our relationships with others, a big part of our ability to be present for others and to be a support network and to be that tree with the strong roots that's offering nourishment to the trees below is that acceptance of self. So looking at whatever traumas you may have experienced, whether it be something from the medical establishment, something from your childhood, something that you're dealing with now, and allowing space for that suffering, that need to heal, that pain. And again, it doesn't mean that it's going to go away overnight. It doesn't mean that you're always going to do it perfectly, but just allowing space and grace for yourself. You know, like I said with yesterday, we were talking about mindfulness. Part of the mindfulness practice is trying to reserve judgment. And I say trying because, you know, we're imperfect humans. So we're always going to have judgment come up, but then not adding shame and judgment of the judgment. So it's the same thing with accepting of yourself. So you're going to have moments where this isn't as perfect for you and you're not doing this as well. And accepting that and just realizing like, hey, I lost it for a moment in front of my 7-year-old and I am not happy with myself about that. But, you know, here's mommy like trying to make it right and model that. And that then allows for compassion, realizing that like sometimes I have my Irish temper and blow my casket. So then when my poor Irish Italian son channels me and his dad and has his moment, it's easier for me to have compassion around that because I've seen it in myself and I accept that as maybe one of the qualities I'm not so thrilled about having. And in turn, I can look back at my Irish father and like when he'd have his meltdowns and accept what maybe happened at times when I was younger and didn't understand that he's imperfect too, you know, and even in spirit, I mean, in spirit now, he's more close to perfect, but you know what I mean? Like in that like past experience, it's a little easier to have compassion looking back and then compassion on yourself for where you were in that moment too. So the reverse, unfortunately, is true. So if we really are unhappy with ourselves, if we have so much shame around, uh, maybe if we're looking back at something that happened to us when we were younger and we don't like how we, you know, that 3 a.m., like last 10 years, all the bad things you did, like bad in quotes, because maybe no one else noticed, but that you're judging within yourself. If you're that angry with yourself and upset with yourself, it's really going to be hard to offer compassion and love to others. So, you know, just kind of looking again with like my kids. So if I'm going through a moment, like I mentioned to you guys, like I've been dealing with some thyroid issues. So, you know, with hypothyroid is, you know, mood lowers and you can get some anxiety, irritability if you're me. So, you know, if I'm having an irritable moment and really just hating life, and then my 7-year-old, I don't know what random stuff does 7-year-old do? Kicks his sister. She's got her new braces, like hits her in the face, you know, not as a jerk, just being a little brother. I'm more likely to yell and freak out at him than I am to go and be like, "Hey, Jack, what's up? Why are you bothering Maeve? Like, what's going on?" And trying to come from a place of understanding and curiosity. Again, we're all imperfect humans. Like, we're all going to have these moments where this occurs, but it's important to take a step back and maybe understand where they came from. Like, why was I such a jerk to this person? Oh, because I hadn't had dinner yet and I was hangry. And you know, that sucks, but now I can maybe offer some food and compassion to myself and move forward and if that person's still around, go let them know, like, hey, sorry about that yesterday. I just was really starving. And unfortunately, you crossed my path at the wrong time, which allows for some respect of self, which we'll kind of get into when we're talking about objectives with conversations. So when we're practicing self-care, it really is, we talk about putting on your oxygen mask first, when with flying, and my social work friends love kind of referencing that when they're talking about therapy with their clients and patients. And it's important. It's important to allow space for self-care. As moms, this is really hard to do because I think because these beings are parts of us, even if they didn't come from our wombs, but they are just feel like parts of us energetically, parts of our hearts and souls. Just as caring individuals, like this could feel like that when we're caring for someone so much. Um, we can often confuse ourselves into thinking that you're caring for yourself when you're giving up everything for this other being. When the fact is, if you're not filling your own cup, you're not going to have anything to offer them. And then unfortunately, that's going to kind of go in the wrong direction for you. So accepting yourself, offering love to yourself, giving yourself that moment to have a warm shower, have a warm bath, have a nap, go get a massage, go for a walk outside in nature, whatever it may be, even if it feels like in the moment to do that, you have to maybe set some boundaries, which if you're not used to doing that can feel like you're rejecting others when really it's not. You're just setting a healthy boundary. So allowing for that boundary to happen, allowing for that acceptance of your needs in the moment is then going to allow you to practice that self-love, and in turn allow you to accept what others are bringing to the table. And they may not have taken the time for that self-care. Like you may be giving that example, they may not be ready to receive it. And so they may come to the table with like not the best skill set. But what's really interesting is when you practice healthy skills in a relationship, if that person is truly present and invested in the relationship, which is important to notice, they can't help but change how they be as well. It may not happen overnight, but if patterns are changed by you embracing boundaries, self-love, practicing that, and then bringing compassion to the space, the dynamic changes. Again, it may be subtle at first, but over time, if you really are practicing this, and again, practice is there in capital letters in the middle of the screen for a reason, because it's not something that happens just like with one one conversation. But if you continue to practice allowing space for yourself, allowing space for your own energy, allowing boundaries, and by boundaries, I mean keeping a safe, energetic space for yourself. Like we talked about creating a safe space and ritual in ceremony, that same energetic space can be created for yourself just in the way of being in the world. And whatever you need to keep that in place is part of accepting yourself, and it's part of offering that care and that self-love for yourself. That then affects your relationship skills and your interactions with others. We'll talk in a minute about like specific ways of practicing skills within the relationship, but it's really important to note that you have to be coming from a place of self-awareness and love and acceptance for these skills to really take hold. So, well-being is something that we can learn, but it's something just like Jon Kabat-Zinn says, takes practice. You might be doing a mindful walk and adding that to that might be your takeaway from these 3 days. Like, I'm going to walk mindfully for 20 minutes every morning because Dr. Holly said that's the best time. We'll talk about why tomorrow. But that might be the practice that you start. Again, it's a practice. And so the first walk is going to feel great. There are going to be days when you're like, do I really want to do this? But you're going to notice a difference. And that may be whatever practice. That might be journaling each day to take a moment to notice where you are for the day. That might be doing the 4-7-8 breathing before you have those difficult conversations so you can be more present in your body and where you are psychologically, so you know what you're bringing to the conversation, and you know what your objectives are. You know what you need to do or what you would like to do to keep yourself in a place of self-love and self-compassion. So when you're seeking changes in your relationship, it's going to be important that you look at yourself first. This is like, the thing that we all did as like high school students is like, I can change him or her or whomever. I can change them. And it's a common thing we all fall into when we're young and, seeking love and all the things we, maybe read about in the romance novels or watch on our stories on TV or what have you. But really, there's nothing you can do and nothing you can control but like your own actions and your own behaviors and your own feelings. So if you're trying to change, like fix your thoughts and feelings connected to relationship stressors, then rather than addressing the stressors and looking at how they fit in your way of being, you're going to move away from what your value system is. So it's really important within a relationship to understand and take that time to yourself to know what your goals are for yourself, what your North Star is, like what is important to you, like what matters to you, um, beyond the relationship, like in life. And these are things, again, like being in tune to yourself in some type of mind body way is going to allow you the space for that third eye, for that intuition to tell you, this is what I want from life. Do I want to be in a relationship? Do I want to be on my own? Do I want to be doing this type of career path? Do I want to do this type of parenting or family or not? And that is really what's going to be of utmost importance, is knowing yourself, knowing what your values are, and then from there making choices about relationships rather than changing or trying to change what your true north is, what your values are to fit into a relationship, because that ladder is painful and honestly doesn't build a healthy relationship. If you're kind of entering a relationship in false pretenses for yourself, it doesn't last. I've seen this happen. It's always easier to see in someone else, right? Like I've seen people I love and adore change how they be to fit with a partner or to fit with a job or to fit with whatever relationship. And lo and behold, a year or two later, they're miserable. Maybe not even that long. But, and we've all been there at times where we've made choices, things look good, and we are just maybe so afraid of being alone or so afraid of not having that job and needing, feeling coming from a place of need and doing and not allowing for that being space of like what allows me to be true to who I am. Um, and then lo and behold, we're burned out, we're unhappy, so it's important to kind of take that space, that awareness for yourself. So, kind of a small review for those who either forgot or didn't have a chance to tune into the masterclass when we talked about this a little bit. When we're talking to loved ones, caregiving teams, kids, bosses, whomever, it is important with that self-awareness, with that space to allow for what is my true north, what is my true goal, to think about what is the goal for the conversation. Like, what is it that I'm entering into this communication with the hope of achieving? So there's three different categories that we often will talk about with relationships, and I've a slide so we can look at these a little closer. So all of these objectives, I should say, play a part in every relationship. It's just a matter of like, what is the higher focus? Like you kind of are ranking them a little bit. And again, this gets back to just being aware. And this might just be something to journal about before you have an important conversation if it's something that's weighing on you. And then with practice, this will kind of come more naturally. So one type of goal might be getting what you want from another person. So that's getting them to wash the dishes, getting them to complete their homework, getting that doctor to order that evaluation, that consultation that you need, having a conflict resolved with a loved one or with a coworker, having them take your point of view seriously. So whatever the want is might be the primary focus for you. You might not care like what they think of you at the end of it. You might not care about the relationship so much. Like I'm ordering a coffee. Of course, I want to be polite and kind, but I want my coffee. Like that. It could be that simple. Then there's ones that are really more like the goal is more about the relationship. Like as a mom, the relationship with my child is probably the highest importance for me when I'm communicating with them. I mean, I guess safety sometimes, which that's a part of it too, but I always want to, unless I'm telling them to get out of the road because a car is coming, oftentimes I'm trying to come from a place of love and a place of compassion and just feeling like I'm a good enough mom, right? So that's going to be about the relationship, about behaving in a way that they are going to like you, going to respect you. And maybe motherhood isn't the perfect example of this because kids aren't always going to like you. But balancing the goals of what's good and what's important for the long-term relationship with maybe what the goal of that immediate conversation is. And then, of course, maintaining that relationship, because if it's something that's important to you, and it could be your boss, like maybe you just really like your boss. Like I don't work for the man anymore, but back when I did, one of my best friends, my kid's Tanti, worked with me. And so when I'd have a conversation with her, that was a big part of our conversation. Even if I had a goal from the man that I had to maintain, like keeping our relationship, our friendship was probably way more important to me. I can't think of a specific example when it wouldn't have been, honestly. Oops. And then, of course, there's the self-respect goal. As someone who was raised Irish Catholic, I get a lot of like Irish Catholic guilt. So I will go into conversations sometimes with another type of goal, and this particular one will come back and haunt me if I feel like I was too direct, if I feel like I was too something. Some of this is like internalized patriarchy, which I understand, and is another thing for me to work through, like self-awareness. But this is something to be aware of, like how much will it haunt you if you don't represent yourself in the best way? And what does representing yourself in the best way look like? Maybe it is sticking up for yourself, and maybe it is having that conversation be uncomfortable because you're willing to say the hard things. And maybe that means some discomfort, and maybe that means that folks may not like you in the end, but it's important to you to have that be heard. So you have to balance that. So that's where the self-respect, like, are you going to still respect yourself if people don't like you at the end of it? And sometimes that's okay. Like, not everyone's going to like you. I think some of the greatest advice is like, it's not really my business what people think of me. And balancing that, like how much can you embrace that thought? But at the same time, do you want to make sure you act in a way that you feel like you're going to be respected, or respect yourself at the end, even if they don't like you, that you can look yourself in the mirror, that you feel like you're being effective and heard, and feel like you can hold on to your beliefs. And that's where these skills are going to come into. Okay. So once you've decided on your main objective, is it keeping your self-respect? Is it keeping that relationship intact and in a good place? Is it getting your specific need met? Again, all three things are going to play a part, but like, what is the primary? Then you get into ways to effectively interact interpersonally. I'm going to use my own recent health issue that I've shared with you guys as an example for this. You can use numerous types of examples, and I suggest, like maybe writing this down and then going back with whatever conversation examples you have. When I work through this with folks one-on-one, we'll usually just go through this acronym and just go through each one as a plan when we're kind of deciding how a conversation will ideally go for them when they're having a difficult conversation. Okay. So this is the Dear Man. So some folks are going to be familiar with this from DBT, but it's one of my favorite skills. Okay. So D is describing the situation. And this sounds like, okay, that's easy. No, it's just the facts. Facts are super important. We'll talk about that more later today. But when you're talking about just the facts, so like before I got my recent blood exam, I noticed and said this to my doctor. I've noticed that over the past several months, I've had like significant weight gain. I've had like significant brain fog. Like I take supplements that help with brain health and they're not helping all of a sudden. I'm noticing that my energy is super low. Like I thought at first it was because I was doing X, Y, and Z for my kids' school, but even when X, Y, and Z is complete, I'm still like taking naps every day and able to sleep well later. I'm noticing like changes in my pain status, like I'm having more pain. I had this recent, lab result that suggests that maybe cholesterol is an issue all of a sudden. I'm noticing all these things that I'm concerned about. So that's just the facts. It's not that, oh, I'm so devastated and I think I'm going to die. And I think that you're a terrible doctor if you don't do this for me. And I think this and I think that. Those aren't the facts. Those are my feelings. Or I'm afraid that you're going to hate me if I have this conversation. Like those are feelings. We're just the facts. Because if we get too much into the feelings, people don't hear us. Like people get distracted by the feelings. It's human nature. They'll take that and run with it. We'll talk about that again more in the next talk later this afternoon. So you can express your feelings and your opinions about the situation, but it's important to say it from an I perspective. So I am worried that I might have issues with my thyroid. I am worried that something else is going on beyond just menopause, which is never just menopause, but sometimes our doctors don't hear us and like to blow things off as things that aren't fully understood or fully researched. In my just the facts, I have a strong history of thyroid concerns. So like expressing my feelings, like I am worried that it'll play out like it did for my mom. My mom has Hashimoto's. Hers was not diagnosed until she was like, there's a pathology textbook that's like the Robbins pathology. It's like the Bible of pathology. My mom was like classic Hashimoto's pathology, losing hair in her eyebrows, like sleeping all the time, like period issues, like all kinds of early menopause, all these things because of her Hashimoto's. Like it was, I mean, the lab results were like crazy by the time they actually figured out what's going on. She was also diagnosed at a time when TSH was not checked in women the way it is now. So the awareness, this is the evolution of medicine. This is why us speaking up and asking for our needs is helping medicine evolve and helping other women that come after us and men that come after us get their needs met as well. So expressing what your opinions are, I think it may be something with my thyroid because of my family history, because of what I observed in my mom, because of what I observed in my daughter. Whatever that is. Again, from an I perspective, it's if we get into feelings and opinions and start doing you are not a great doctor because you didn't pick up on this, defenses come up and it's harder for people to hear. Assert yourself. So it's important to be confident. It's important to not be like, well, I think it might be this. And I don't know. I could be wrong though. Like it might not be like, and I might be feeling that. Like I definitely have self-doubts. Just because I have an MD behind my name doesn't make me not feel like a patient when I'm in the room being a patient. Doesn't mean that I'm not always, heard. Like I may not always be heard. Believe me, that's part of what comes into my anxieties when I have these conversations is, I went through a time as a young adult not being heard and seen and not being respected and understood and being misjudged in ways that were devastating. And so that unfortunately can make the asserting myself a little difficult. So it's a fake it till you make it kind of experience. It's a keeping eye contact. It's taking some 4-7-8 breaths before you go in and trying to keep yourself together. So maybe if the tears flow, but so you can do it in a way that you feel okay about it when you're leaving the room. Reinforce positive and negative consequences. Again, in this medical needs example, it might be, I'm worried that if this isn't addressed, I'm going to continue to not be able to function. I'm not going to be able to hold my business together because my brain fog is just going to get too bad and I can't, keep things straight. I'm going to be a danger on the roads because I can't remember where I'm driving. I'm going to have heart disease or a worsening of symptoms to the point that that I might die. I might not be present for my family. You don't have to go to that extreme, but you can if that's a concern for you. That's okay. It's important to acknowledge what the consequences are. Don't always assume that the person has those consequences at the top of their mind, because it's your story. It's your concern. It's your ask or conversation that you're engaging in. Mindfulness is key. Gets back to that awareness, back to that acceptance of self. It's really important to stay in the moment and focus on what your goal, your objective is. Conversations are two-way streets, right? Like, unless you're writing a letter, which is a way to do it, or an email, which, if you want to start a conversation that way, if it's with someone who's just too difficult due to trauma or due to past history, that like having the back and forth isn't something that works well, like they tend to explode first and then calm down. You can do this in writing first and then have the conversation face to face, whatever, only you can know like what works best in each relationship. But being present and aware is going to help you decide that. So knowing like, hey, this is, if I'm having a conversation with my husband and the Pelicans just lost, he's the play-by-play guy for the Pelicans. That's not a good time to have a serious conversation with my husband, because he's going to get very Italian and very dramatic, very glass half empty, and he's not going to hear my needs. So mindfulness and awareness is key to any conversation, both in the timing of the conversation and in when the back and forth starts happening. My doctor may be super busy and may not want to hear what I have to say. Being aware enough to say, hey, I see that you're busy. I see that you're getting pages. Can we continue this conversation on, if you need to go like via the portal, can you just, let me know, should I talk to your nurse before I go? Can you write the order? And then I can talk to her more about my questions and concerns, whatever it may be. Or him. I shouldn't be sexist. Men, some of my favorite nurses are dudes. And then appearing confident. That gets back to that good eye contact, maintaining your way of being, being aware of posture and how you're holding yourself. And, that gets back again to the self-care. Like, I usually, when I talk to people in my practice about having these difficult conversations, or if they're anticipating interacting with someone who causes a lot of stress, or whose actions cause a lot of stress, I should say, having that moment before you go in of 4-7-8 breathing, of some relaxing yoga, some mindful walking, some Tai Chi, whatever it may be, to build up your reserves so you're able to stay in a confident space, do it. Whatever it is, whatever, shouting, singing to the radio, whatever it is, so that you can be in a space where you can conduct yourself, that you can be heard. And then it is a two-way conversation. So being willing to negotiate. So when I went in and asked for labs for my thyroid, I specifically mentioned my family history of autoimmunity. I already had an autoimmune diagnosis, and autoimmune diseases tend to they love to come in pairs. They love to, it's never just one, or it may be if you're lucky, but they love to like clump together. And Ehlers-Danlos also loves to like carry them along as like a little buddy. So I knew going in that this is something that's important, a specific type of lab that I really wanted. But I also know I don't like to be my own doctor. I don't like to be my kid's doctor. Funny story, funny haha. He's probably going to cringe in his grave. When I was a kid and my family moved from North Carolina up to Buffalo, New York, I had that summer been dancing in Ireland and broke my foot. I think the place where the dance camp or whatever summer sessions were held wasn't bouncy enough. And so, I had like a whatever kind of experience. So it was a break in my foot. It wasn't like a break where you couldn't walk, but I was definitely bitching. But my dad, the physician, was so focused on the move and the stress of the move and the change in jobs that he just thought I was just being a bitchy 14-year-old or whatever, however old I was at the time, and blew it off. And he eventually, when they finally checked, my foot not only had been broken, like it had calloused over and healed, because he just couldn't hear me where I was. So I I know going in that being the doctor to your kid isn't the best idea because you're colored by the bias of being the parent. And that's the same as, my own bias as a physician. Like I know from going through medical school, one of the first things, the big joke is like every med student has like the most zebra of diagnoses, which is hilarious because I actually have a zebra of a diagnosis. But you know what I mean? Like it kind of, when you have too much of your ego in there, it can get in the way. So when I pick my doctors very carefully for this reason. I always ask like nurses and folks who are support staff, like, who do you think is the best doctor? Because they know the inside scoop. I ask doctors I trust for the same reason. I ask colleagues who I trust. So I trust the people I work with. It's taken me years to get to this point. So I go in knowing like, okay, maybe I think this is the best thing, or maybe they'll think like an ultrasound would be better, or that they really need to do a physical exam and feel my thyroid. Maybe, there's different approaches, and part of the relationship, if you have a healthy one, is having some trust. So you may go in with a certain goal in mind. And if it's like your medical team, perhaps there's a new study or a new way of doing things that Dr. Google didn't tell you. So being willing to hear what that person said. I just recently had a patient ask for a certain type of blood test. I happen to know that blood test won't give them the answer that they're asking for. So I said, I don't usually use that one for this reason. Let's do this instead. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So having that back and forth, being willing to negotiate, being willing to compromise and hear. And, again, I used a medical example, but this could be me talking to my kid about doing their homework. My daughter, recently had like some anxiety around testing. And so some back and forth with the school about navigating that, or back and forth with my husband about, I don't know, what we're having for dinner. It can be anything, but these are kind of steps that we can take if we're going in, finding ourselves in a place where emotions sometimes drive us and not in a way that gets our needs met. If we feel like, and I've been here. I'm saying this from a place of experience. Like in my 20s, in the height of the stress of feeling like I wasn't seen and heard in my illness, I was not effective in my communication skills anywhere. And I mean, there was a lot of shame around that. It's taken me a lot of work to get to a place where I can talk about that and not cringe at the girl I was then. Even though I was a young adult, I feel like I was very much still a girl because of the trauma of having this chronic illness that wasn't being recognized and diagnosed. It affected everything. And so, looking back at the frustrations I had of feeling no one hears me, no one's listening. And that's true. But at the same time, I was not communicating in a way that could be heard. Like both things can be true. So it wasn't all my fault for not communicating in a way that couldn't be heard. But had I had these skills, I think I would have gotten a little further in the journey than I did in the moment when I didn't have these skills. I hope that makes sense. I hope that sounds as loving as I mean it to be, because I don't want this to cause any kind of shame or any kind of adding to any feelings of lack of self-worth or anything like that, because you're amazing and awesome and perfect where you are right now. And this is a skill that's going to help you get to a place where the person or people that need to hear you for you to get that need met can do so. And again, when you're using these skills effectively, they have to change how they communicate in kind if it's a relationship worth keeping. And I know this because these are skills I've had family members learn and had other family members tell me, now that she's doing this like DBT stuff, I can't help but change how I'm communicating with her because she's like so much more effective. It's like awesome to see in real time. So if you have a relationship where the relationship itself is a main focus for you or important to you, or your self-worth is super important to you. So it's not just ordering a coffee. It's not just, hey, I need this flight changed. Hey, if there's a big part of the relationship or your self-worth, then it's important to also use a set of skills that are known as Give Fast in the DBT world. These are the skills that allow you to still hold your self-worth, hold the relationship in a way that it's still salvaged and still kept and loved and cared about with the conversation. So the needs aren't just met, but you also like have a good relationship. Like, even with my medical needs, like I like my medical team. So I don't want to leave a conversation with just my lab ordered. I want to leave the conversation with the doc who I respect and think highly of, thinking, respecting and thinking highly of me too. So this is a part of it. It's part of being human. So one way to do that is to be gentle. So not judging, not attacking, not threatening. When those things come up, we'll talk about like what to think of when those things come up in our next session this afternoon, because those do kind of, grab my water, lend themselves to a different type of conversation that maybe triggers us to need to take a step back a minute. Sorry. Act interested. So listen, like you're going to go in, obviously, if you like, let's say you and I have had a session, we practice what you're going to talk about, you're going into your medical team, and all you know is your script. And your doc or your loved one or whomever you're having this conversation with has important information for you. Maybe they don't think what you're asking for is right, is a good thing to do right now for this reason. Like maybe your medical team has a plan and they think jumping to this part of the plan is going to cause more stress or give information that isn't helpful yet, or whatever. Like maybe my doc would have been like, hey, I think we should try seeing this nutritionist first and trying these lifestyle changes first and doing this first, and then we'll go to this next route. And hey, I'm an integrative physician. Like I'm all for that. So act interested and do your best to actually hear them. And I get it's human nature when you're in a conversation to just be thinking of what you're going to say next. But if you can be mindful and be in the moment and practice those mindfulness, mind body exercises that we've been talking about, that's going to allow you to not only know what you're saying next, but hear what they're saying as well. And you know what? If you're talking to someone, if you're talking to a doctor or a medical team, bring notes. Hello, we love those. So it's okay to like break it out and be like, dude, doc, I have this thing I want to talk to you about. I made some notes because, I get anxious when I'm in here. My blood pressure always goes up when I'm in the doctor's office and my anxiety goes up. So if it's okay, I'm going to refer to these so that, you have them and you can still hear what they have to say to you. If it's a loved one, like, hey, I wrote this down. I really want to talk to you about this. I want to make sure that my emotions don't keep me from expressing what I feel like I really want to make sure I say to you. So, that's why I have my phone out. That's why I have this piece of paper out, like just, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to like let people know that. So when you are hearing what the person says, it's important to validate that. So that means, hey, I hear that you're saying that this isn't the best lab test because blah, blah, blah. I hear that you're saying that you can't pick up the kids tomorrow because X, Y, and Z. I hear that you're saying that you don't feel confident talking to your teacher about this because blah, blah, blah. So that can be like saying what you hear, which is a great technique because sometimes what we hear isn't what they intended to say. And again, human nature. It might be our projection. It might be their inability to use the skills that we just talked about. Also just your actions, like looking interested, keeping eye contact, nodding, not looking around and being like, whatever, rolling your eyes and like, acting like a tween, like actually like being interested. And you may want to roll your eyes and that's totally okay. But if you can like try not to, then it's going to be more effective for you, I promise. And then trying to be easy, trying to have some humor, have some soft sell, have some vulnerability. Like it's okay to be honest and say, this is a hard conversation for me. And it might be hard for you as well. And I just want to like be here together and try to get through it. Or, how I always like to, how I normally just act like my Irish self. I'm trying something different. I know, let's see how it goes. Ha ha. Whatever it may be, that kind of feels genuine and you and is in alignment with your values and your way of being. It's going to ease the conversation and make it easier for them to hear you. Be fair. Be fair to yourself. You don't need to misrepresent yourself. You don't need to compromise to the point that you're not getting your needs met. You don't need to invalidate your own values and own needs and wants. Again, it gets back to that. What are your values? What's your true north? And staying true to that, staying true to your boundaries. And that's part of being fair to yourself. It's also being fair to them. Like if you are going into a relationship always bending backwards, at some point you're going to break. And that's not fair to them either. Like if their like standard way of being is that you always say yes, and then instead of like gently bringing back to a boundary and saying, you know what, I need to say no this time because of this, you instead break and flip out and like, for me, like have the Irish come out, that's not fair to them either. Because if they're used to you always saying yes, and they don't know that you're changing the rules without communicating, that's not going to cause the best reaction in them because they're probably just going to flip out in kind, right? So being fair and allowing the rules to be stated for everyone to see them is going to allow for more of a friendly back and forth, a more productive back and forth, more importantly, so that you get closer to getting those needs met. Don't apologize. This is really hard. I think as women, I don't know if it's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's genetics. I know Irish people say sorry all the time. So maybe for me, it's genetics. Like we literally say, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. Like if we're like, as excuse me, we say sorry. As for whatever, we say sorry. So just be aware if you're apologizing. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but sorry if this sounds stupid, but sorry if I'm an idiot, but like you don't need to be sorry. And don't be sorry for being alive. Don't be sorry for making the request that you deserve to make because you're badass and you deserve to make it. Like, you don't need to apologize for it. Like, you're amazing. You deserve to have this conversation. You deserve to get your needs met. And stop apologizing. Just quit it. Just don't do it. I adore you. And if you do it, it's okay. Just move forward and say, you know what? I didn't mean to apologize because I actually am not sorry that I'm interrupting you because this is an important conversation. And stick to your values. Again, that gets back to the being mindful in the moment, giving yourself that space, journaling it out if you need to before the conversation, deciding what's important to you, deciding what your value is, deciding what's most important to you objectively out of the conversation, like what's going to get you to a place where your needs are met. That's going to be part of what you need to do to make this happen. And then be truthful. Like you don't need to exaggerate. When I went to my doc asking, can I get these labs? Which of course then turned out to be like confirm my intuition. I didn't need to like exaggerate and say like I noticed, this is something in it. This is actually, I'm grateful for this because now it'll inform when I'm seeing people. But I noticed for me with the hypothyroid tendencies, I was getting like a biologically depressive symptoms, but I like psychologically did not feel depressed. Like I was low mood and energy and motivation, but I wasn't like low mood in that like I was like pregnant crying. I'm not pregnant, believe me, that ship has sailed. But like, like crying over like, I mean, it's one thing to cry at my kid's musical, which I totally did, but like crying over like, I don't know, whatever show, like, and I'm still, because I'm just starting medicine. So this is still happening. Like last night I was watching Rescue 911. I'm like boo-hooing. Which, I love to get a good teary eye. Like, that's just part of my way of being, but like boo-hooing. And that was important for me to let my doctor know about. But I don't need to say, oh, I'm so depressed, I'm going to kill myself. I'm so depressed that I can't get out of bed. I'm so depressed, because that's not true. And the danger of saying that is that I'm going to get hospitalized for something that's not true just because I was so desperate to get my needs met, that my needs don't get met because they're going to respond to the exaggeration rather than to the truth, which is I'm biologically low. I have noticed this tearfulness at things, but like I'm still hopeful. I'm still like doing the things. I'm still like loving myself and I'm not thinking about death. I'm not thinking about killing myself. I'm not thinking about, like, so like I'm not checking all the boxes for depression, but biologically I feel depressed. I don't know. It's something to tease out, but if you have thyroid issues, I think you know what I'm talking about. But it's important for that. Like, that's an example of like being truthful, like saying just the facts, saying what the actual facts are and not exaggerating the facts in a desperation. And I get it because I went in pretty desperate. I had a lot of fears. I talked to my mom about it. I talked to my girlfriends about it. I was really worried that the doctor wouldn't hear me because I've had that experience. So I was really worried that I would be dismissed. I was really worried, like, what would I do next if this didn't happen? I just went into a spiral that I'll talk about, like a skill around that in our next talk. But by not like engaging in that spiral, I was able to represent myself as true, like where I am now. And the doctor heard me. So I didn't need to act helpless. I didn't need to exaggerate because what I was presenting with was enough to have the person respond. And that, I'm giving a medical example, but that can be true. Like my daughter, like I said, has, test anxiety. Like she doesn't need to exaggerate and say that like she's having panic when she's not. She's just has symptoms that happen and needs a standing desk so she can have more mind body stuff that helps her like tune back in when she gets into that fight or flight. Like that's her skill that she uses, that we've determined. So it doesn't have to be this big exaggerated thing. Like I can't take a test ever or I'm going to fail it. Like, no, that's not true at all. Like she just needs a different accommodation. Or I don't know, like if, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of like a less dramatic example. If I don't need to like tell my husband if he doesn't empty the dishwasher that like my hands are going to be so painful from emptying the dishwasher. Like he knows I have arthritis. He knows that my Ehlers-Danlos like acts up at times. And when I have hand therapy and things are more sore, I just let him know like, hey, my hands are really sore. I can't open this. I can't, do this as effectively. Do you mind doing it now? If you can't, I can do it later. It's just, it would be great if we could have that happen now. Like it doesn't have to be this big, like dramatic thing. All right. Okay. So I hope that serves you. Oh, good. We're just on the hour. So, that's, like I said, just one initial set of skills. Again, like you guys can reach out to me as needed. I just made a code for free discovery calls for the group. Thrive, all caps, THRIVE, allows for like free discovery calls. The discovery calls that I have on my site have like a $5 donation charge. It's mainly just so people don't blow them off and like use them up and don't show up because that is sad and makes it so other people can't use them. But if you don't want to do a donation, that's cool. It's for Fill the Needs. If you're interested, that's an organization I'm blessed to be on the board with. And they literally fill the needs for people. We just like raised money for a guy whose bike was stolen when he was delivering an Uber Eats. And now he has an amazing electronic bike that we were all able to kind of get monies together and fill that need. We do it with a lot of disaster relief and things like that. And it's a super cool organization that I just adore and can tell you more about if you would like to know at any point. So I appreciate it. I adore you guys. VIPs will get on and have more conversations at the 1 o'clock hour and some Q&A then. And I will see you guys then. Others, it's never too late to join us if you want to learn some more skills around this, learn skills about what to do when things are getting overwhelming and you're not really sure where it's going. You can always join today or join later and still get all the videos for life. And I hope to see you in some of these spaces. All right. Bye, guys.